Imagine for a moment that you are a woman who has experienced relationships where everything seemed to fit. Good conversations, mutual attraction, even shared plans. But suddenly, he disappears emotionally, or worse, stays without truly staying. And then you wonder, what truly makes a man fall in love? What is it that awakens in him a deep connection beyond desire or habit? Most women believe that love arises from effort, constant care, and demonstrating interest and devotion. And while all of that has its place, what many don't know, and here Carl Jung gives us a powerful clue, is that falling in love doesn't happen on the surface, but in the unconscious. What truly awakens deep love in a man isn't always visible. It's not in what you do or what you say. It's in what you represent for him without him realizing it. It's in that silent energy you emit when you stop trying to please, when you simply are yourself. And often, the more you disconnect from the need to be chosen, the more deeply you are etched into his mind. It's not magic, it's psychology. Jung called this archetypal projection, the phenomenon where the other person doesn't fall in love with you as you are, but with what you awaken in their inner world. Maybe he never told you, but there was a moment when he looked at you and saw something greater than a woman. He saw a symbol, an energy, something that confronted him and at the same time drew him in. Have you ever felt unforgettable to someone without having done anything extraordinary? Did someone come back to look for you after a long time without an apparent reason? Perhaps it wasn't you who captured him, but what you awakened in him. If something like this has happened to you, I'd love for you to share it in the comments, because such experiences often reveal much more than we imagine. The great paradox is that men don't fall in love with what they understand, but with what they can't fully comprehend. They fall in love with what they can't control, with what challenges their mental structures. And when a woman lives from her truth, when she doesn't betray herself out of fear of losing him, something changes. Her presence becomes magnetic, even if she isn't trying to attract. But many women, instead of trusting that authenticity, lose themselves trying to fit in, trying to be what they think he needs. And that's when the bond begins to die. Not because love is lacking, but because the spark born from mystery has faded. Jung said that what we repress becomes our destiny, and when a woman represses her essence, her energy stops resonating in the other's soul. The most fascinating thing is that often, the man doesn't even understand why he thinks so much about her, why he dreams of her, why even after letting her go, her image returns like a whisper that won't fade. And when a woman unknowingly embodies an archetype he hasn't yet integrated, she becomes a mirror, and no one forgets the mirror that made them look inside themselves for the first time. Carl Jung explained something with almost poetic clarity. We don't love people for who they are, but for what they represent to us. And when a woman, without intending to, embodies a powerful symbol for the masculine unconscious, she awakens in him an attraction that goes far beyond the physical. It's an attraction that touches ancient fibers, that activates dormant emotional memories. It's not coincidence, it's psychic destiny. A man may meet many women in his life. Some will make him laugh, others will accompany him in difficult times. Some may even share years by his side. But there's only one who lingers in silence, resonating. And it's not always the most beautiful or the most perfect. It's almost always the one who didn't try to be. It's the one who showed herself with a mix of calm and certainty. The one who didn't need external validation. The one who, instead of pleasing him, chose herself without guilt. That woman, without realizing it, becomes a symbolic figure, a manifestation of his anima, the feminine part of his unconscious that hasn't yet been integrated. And when she appears in his life, something inside him stirs. But here's the curious part. Many women don't notice when they're in that role. They don't realize the impact they're having because they aren't doing anything special. They're just being. They're vibrating in authenticity, connected to their essence. And that authenticity is deeply disruptive for a man who has lived relationships where emotional connection was superficial or based on expectations. In that instant, he doesn't fall in love with her words or her body. He falls in love with what she reflects back to him, that unexplored part of himself he suddenly begins to feel. And of course, this can scare him because deep love isn't comfortable. It's transformative. It forces him to look inward. That's why some men, just when they start feeling something real, pull away, not because they don't care, but because something inside them tells them that this woman isn't like the others. And if they stay, they'll have to change. They'll have to surrender, to open themselves to a part of their soul that's been asleep. And often, they aren't ready because the image this woman activates is too intense, too alive. They can't control it. They can't label it. And so they flee. But not from her. They flee from what they're feeling inside. That's why it's so important for you, as a woman, not to take this as a rejection. If you've ever walked away from someone without understanding why their departure hurt so much, maybe it wasn't unrequited love. Maybe you were the reflection he couldn't hold on to. Tell me something. Have you ever felt pushed away not for what you did, but for what you represented? Did you struggle to understand it? Share it in the comments, because your experience could help many others who are feeling the same right now. When a woman stops searching for love and starts inhabiting herself, something in her energy changes. It's not about pride or indifference. It's a silent, serene force that communicates without words. I belong to myself. And for the masculine unconscious, that's an invitation as powerful as it is disconcerting. Carl Jung believed that what we don't integrate within ourselves, we seek outside. So when a man encounters a woman who embodies qualities he hasn't developed, emotional freedom, intuition, depth, something inside him awakens, and not necessarily in a pleasant way. Sometimes the first thing he feels isn't attraction but discomfort. Why? Because she reflects back to him a void, an internal place he's avoided for years. Maybe his whole life he's pursued relationships where he was the protector, the strong one, the one in control. But now, faced with this woman who doesn't need rescuing, who doesn't idolize him, who doesn't crave his attention, he feels disarmed. And that's often where the obsession begins, not with her as a person, but with recovering that false sense of control her presence dismantled. He doesn't know it consciously, but what he's seeking isn't to win her back, it's to repair his own fractured identity. This explains why some men, after losing a woman like this, can't fully let her go. Months or even years may pass, and they still carry her memory like a scar. It's not that they haven't moved on completely, it's that she represents a before and after in their emotional lives. The problem is that many don't know what to do with that void. They haven't learned to look inward, to take responsibility for their wounds. So they search outside, other women, more work, distractions, but nothing fills what she left behind because what's gone wasn't a person. It was a possibility of transformation. And here's the point most people miss. That woman isn't unforgettable because she was perfect, but because she was authentic. Because she left when she knew staying would mean betraying herself. Because she didn't scream or beg. She simply closed the door with dignity. And that rare, courageous gesture leaves a mark on the masculine soul like a lesson that can't be forgotten. To you listening to this, have you ever felt your dignity was misinterpreted as coldness? That your silence was read as disinterest, when in reality, it was your way of honoring yourself? If so, share it below. Maybe someone needs to read it to understand that letting go isn't surrendering. It's saving yourself. The unconscious doesn't distinguish between the real and the symbolic. For Jung, this was one of the most powerful truths of the human psyche. That's why when a woman becomes a symbol in a man's mind, she stops being an ordinary person. She becomes an idea, an echo, a mirror. And no one forgets the mirror that made them confront themselves. After losing her, many men believe what they miss is her physical presence. But what truly pains them is the disconnection from the feelings she evoked. That mix of admiration, confusion, and desire they couldn't explain logically. Because when a bond touches the soul, no rational closure is enough. In that absence, the masculine unconscious begins working with an intensity that's frightening. He replays conversations, remembers gestures, idealizes moments, but none of it brings back the original sensation because he isn't searching for her. He's searching to return to the internal place he could only access through her. And that, at its core, is both beautiful and tragic. Because the more he tries to relive her in memory, the further he strays from the real opportunity for integration, to look inward and ask, what parts of me were activated by her presence? What void was exposed when she left? The woman who doesn't compete, who doesn't beg, who isn't desperate to hold on, embodies something deeply revolutionary for a man's mind. She doesn't represent traditional romance or the accommodating figure. She represents freedom. And that, though it may hurt, fascinates because deep down, we all seek to be free. But few are willing to love from that freedom. In that process, the man unknowingly begins his journey toward individuation. Jung explained that this is the process by which we stop searching outside for what we can only find within. And often that journey doesn't begin with an epiphany but with a loss. Sometimes all it takes is a glance, a farewell without demands, a door closing with serenity for a man's entire inner world to collapse. And in that collapse, he doesn't find just sadness. He finds an opportunity, because where nothing remains, something new can be built. And perhaps that's what marks him the most, that she didn't try to stay by force, that she didn't fight against his departure, that she understood something essential. What's true doesn't need to be forced, and the deepest love isn't begged for, it's honored. I want to ask you something with complete honesty. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who couldn't see your worth? Did you do it from self-love, even if it hurt? If you feel moved to, share it in the comments. Your story may touch more hearts than you imagine. In the solitude that follows the departure of a conscious woman, a silent transformation begins. At first, he believes he can move on as he always has, distracting himself, replacing, denying. But something is different this time. Nothing fills him, nothing calms him, because this wasn't just another loss. It was an internal rupture. Carl Jung spoke of inflection points in the psyche, moments when life, without asking permission, forces us to confront what we don't want to see. For many men, that woman who left without fanfare, without dramatic explanations, becomes one of those points. Not because she wanted to hurt him, but because, with her absence, she showed him a truth no one else had dared to reflect. Suddenly, he begins asking questions he's never asked before. Why did I feel I needed her? Why did it hurt so much when she left if I barely knew her? What part of me was I searching for in her? And there, in that sea of questions, the image he had of himself starts to crumble. He's no longer the man who controls everything, the one who never falls in love, the one who leads emotionally. Now, he's a vulnerable human being, touched by a connection deeper than all the others, a connection that didn't leave him unchanged. And though it confuses him, it also moves him. What that woman represented, with her silence, her autonomy, her loving but authentic detachment, was something he hadn't yet discovered within himself. She didn't come to offer him stability. She came to show him how unstable his inner world was. And that revelation, however harsh, is the beginning of awakening. Many men, upon reaching this point, resist. They want to return to their previous state, to forget, to bury. But the soul doesn't work that way. Once it's been touched, there's no going back. And so, in the midst of that discomfort, some decide to do something different. They pause, they breathe, they look inward. They start reading, remembering, questioning about their childhood, past relationships, the patterns they've repeated without realizing it. They begin to examine their need for validation, their fear of abandonment, their difficulty loving without control. And little by little, they start to understand she wasn't the problem. The problem was the distorted image they projected onto her. This moment is key because here, the possibility of integration is born, the chance to stop searching outside for what can only be built within. And with time, the wound begins to heal, not from denial, but from acceptance, from the humility of recognizing that love is much more than possession. And you, watching this, maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've also felt your presence was misunderstood, or that your departure was interpreted as coldness when, in reality, it was your soul choosing peace. If you recognize yourself in this, leave it in the comments. Your truth could be the reflection someone else needs today. As time passes, something changes, not loudly, not with a grand external event, but in silence. It's as if, within him, another way of seeing begins to emerge. He no longer searches for that woman in others. He no longer chases her in memories. Now, he starts to understand what really happened. Carl Jung said the process of individuation begins when we stop identifying with our masks. And that's precisely what has happened. He's stopped seeing himself as the conqueror, the one always in control. He's begun to see his cracks, and far from frightening him, those cracks start becoming his most human parts. The woman who left calmly, who didn't demand, who didn't make scenes, now appears in his mind differently. She's no longer the unattainable woman. She's the woman who, without intending to, showed him the value of his own inner world. It's no longer about getting her back. It's about understanding what she awakened. And what she awakened wasn't desire. It was presence. It was awareness. It was an invitation to return to himself, because what captivated him wasn't her silence, but what that silence reflected. A woman who didn't need validation to feel whole. A woman who wasn't willing to stay at the cost of her peace. In a culture where men are taught that to love is to possess, that to connect is to dominate, this feminine figure who loves from freedom represents an internal revolution. She can't be manipulated. She can't be held onto. She can only be honored. And that, in the deepest way, transforms him. He begins to treat himself differently, to listen to himself more, to stop searching for love as if it were salvation. It's no longer about finding someone who chooses him despite his emptiness, but about becoming someone who chooses himself with honesty, and, from there, creating real bonds. At that moment, her image softens. It no longer hurts, as it once did. Now it's a luminous, almost sacred memory, because it was she who, without trying, ignited his soul, not to stay, but to show him the way. And if you, as a woman, have ever felt your way of loving was misunderstood, if you've ever chosen to leave because staying would have meant betraying yourself, I want you to know something. Those kinds of decisions aren't forgotten. Maybe no one told you. Maybe he never fully understood it. But you planted something, and that seed, even if it, germinated in silence, changed a life. Have you ever felt your energy left a mark on someone without you intending it? That your departure was more meaningful than any forced stay? If so, share your experience below. Your story could also be a spark in someone else's journey. There comes a point when obsession fades and gives way to something deeper, understanding. It's no longer just the need to have her close. It's the recognition that she was, without knowing it, a turning point, the mark of a before and after. Not because of what she said, but because of how she existed, because of how she left. Carl Jung believed that what moves us deeply remains within us as a symbol, and a symbol isn't erased. It doesn't need to be present to keep acting. That's what happens with her. She's no longer there, but her energy lives on, like a melody that keeps playing long after the song has ended. He begins to see more clearly, to understand that for a long time he sought relationships where he could feel validated, important, indispensable. But with her, it was different. With her, there was no need, no struggle. There was choice, and that disarmed him because no one had taught him to love from freedom. No one had shown him he could be vulnerable without losing dignity, that he could be unnecessary and still be deeply loved. She did, not with words, but with presence, and also with her absence. And this is where true transformation arises. He no longer searches for women to fill a void. He no longer tries to correct what he feels with new stories. Now he knows love isn't something to demand or earn. It's something to share from peace, not from lack. The most beautiful part is that at this moment, she no longer needs to do anything. She doesn't have to return, explain herself, or prove anything. Her role has already been fulfilled. She was a catalyst, a beacon, a mirror. Her energy did what it had to do, awaken him. And you, watching this, have you ever felt you were the starting point in someone's emotional awakening, even if that bond didn't last? Did you sense something profound remained in the other, even if they never said it? If any part of this story resonates with you, share it below. Sometimes, sharing what we've lived is the quietest and most powerful way to heal. In this new stage, he no longer runs from himself. Now he understands that everything he sought in her, that calm, that depth, that freedom, he can also build within. Maybe not immediately, maybe not, without effort, but with every conscious decision, he moves closer to his truth. And the curious thing is that he no longer needs to find it in another person, because now, when he remembers her passing through his life, he doesn't do it with nostalgia. but with gratitude, because it was she who, without knowing it, showed him that the most real love isn't about staying, it's about leaving a mark. And so, in the place where there was once emptiness, there's now understanding. It no longer hurts, as it did. There's no more anxiety for answers. There's a new way of seeing life, more serene, more honest, more awake. Because when a man crosses the threshold of himself, he can no longer love the same way. Carl Jung said that what we accept in ourselves transforms us, and that's exactly what has happened. That man who once needed to feel chosen, to feel valuable, now understands his worth isn't in being desired, but in being authentic. He no longer searches from lack. He loves from wholeness. Her image, that woman who didn't beg, who didn't stay where she wasn't seen, is no longer a wound. It's a compass. Her memory, which once burned, now illuminates because she wasn't a loss. She was a message, a lesson wrapped in presence and then in absence. And what seemed like a goodbye was actually the beginning of everything. That love, which didn't end with promises or explanations, left space for something even greater. Transformation, not of a relationship, but of the soul. Why? Because when someone touches your essence, it doesn't matter if they stay or go. What matters is what they awaken in you. And you, woman, on the other side of this story, maybe you never knew the real impact your energy had. Maybe you thought you left unnoticed. But I want you to remember this. When you love from awareness, from dignity, from freedom, you always leave a mark. Not in the other's ego, but in their soul. And that remains. And you, man, who has lived this process, maybe now you understand that what you lost wasn't her, but a part of yourself you hadn't yet embraced. And maybe, just maybe, her departure wasn't the end, but the door that led you back to yourself. I invite you to share in the comments what this video stirred within you. Maybe you've lived a similar story. Maybe you're that woman who knew how to let go in time. Maybe you're that man who began to awaken. Whatever your experience, your voice could be the mirror someone needs today. And if this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone ready to love from a different place. Don't leave just yet, because the next video we'll upload may help you understand even more the invisible dynamics affecting your relationships. There, we'll continue this journey of self-discovery with Jung as our guide and you as the protagonist. Remember this, what's true doesn't need to be chased, it only needs to be lived. And what's lived with the soul is never forgotten. See you soon, and until then, keep returning to yourself.